Richard Old Man Harrison was not only a grouchy, but endearing figure on the popular reality series Pawn Stars. He was a guy who built an empire from his diligence, knowledge, and humor. Renowned for his caustic tongue and no-nonsense approach, he quickly became a fan favorite when the program launched on the History Channel in 2009. Long before Pawn Stars became one of the network's most popular shows, Richard had already laid the groundwork for his wealth. It all began in the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop in Las Vegas, Nevada. Richard established the store in 1989 with his son Rick Harrison. From day one it was a 24/7 enterprise. Though neither glitzy or spectacular, it became a lifeline for those wishing to purchase, sell, or pawn valuable things. Through time, the store developed a reputation for its honesty, knowledge, and the broad spectrum of historical and unusual products that passed through its doors. Richard's austere attitude and look earned him the moniker Old Man in his late 30s, though his work ethic remained unrivaled despite the moniker. He worked every day from 1994 until his death in 2018. At 77, Richard had no intention to retire. His commitment to the store and to his family remained constant. Then Pawn Stars arrived and everything changed. From a modest reality program concept, what developed into a cultural phenomenon was fast. The combination of history, comedy, and family relationships appealed to viewers. Within 3 months after its launch, the show became the most watched program on the History Channel. Filmed over almost 300 episodes, Pawn Stars transformed the Harrison family into household names and converted the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop into a must-see destination for Las Vegas-bound fans. Key player on the program, Richard made $15,000 every episode. Given the show's tremendous popularity, which generated $3 million every episode for the network, it's understandable that Richard's net worth rose to $8 million by the time he passed away in 2018. Apart from the program, his riches also resulted from decades of operating the pawn store and his eye for finding treasures. His legacy was one of diligence, astute business acumen, and the capacity to transform even the most unanticipated things into profit. But the inquiry is this: Richard Old Man Harrison amassed his wealth. How exactly? What were the keys to his success? More crucially, who would get the riches he left behind? You have to look back to Richard Harrison's early days to see how he became the old guy with a $8 million net worth. Richard, who was born in Danville, Virginia in 1941, came from a lowly background. When he was just 1 year old, his parents relocated to Lexington, North Carolina, and lived into a modest home on Peacock Avenue. Life was not simple. From early age Richard understood the need of diligence. Driving a school bus to get money at 14, he was paid only $5 or $6 a week. Richard's life changed dramatically when he was arrested for stealing a car. He left high school in his junior year to assist his family. Given the option between the military and prison, he picked the Navy. Though taken under pressure, this choice changed the direction of his life in ways no one could have foreseen. Richard joined the United States Navy at only 17 years old and served for 20 years. Over this period, he served on 4 different ships, including the fleet tug USS Choanock, and advanced to petty officer first class. Working as a paymaster helped him to control money, a talent that would eventually be really important for his pawn company. Life in the Navy, however, was not all plain sailing. Of his 20 years spent deployed at sea, Richard spent 14 away from his family. He once remarked, "That's the only thing I didn't like." Driven by a strong feeling of duty, Richard kept dedicated to his mission despite the challenges. His family was one of such obligations. In 1960, Richard wed his local love Joanne Rue. Soon after, the couple welcomed their first kid, Sherry, born with Down syndrome. Richard re-enlisted in the Navy after leaving short to pay for her large medical bills. Though her memories and Richard's sacrifices for her formed the sort of guy he became, someone who always placed his family first, Sherry sadly died at the age of 6. Richard and Joanne had a fresh difficulty when he left the Navy in 1979. Richard worked part-time for Joanne, who had created a thriving real estate company. They were doing well for a time, but rising mortgage interest rates and the early 1980s economic slump drove their company down. They lost almost everything, including $1 million in savings. Richard and Joanne packed up their 3 sons and relocated to Las Vegas, Nevada with just $5,000 left to their name, to begin again in 1981. Richard's entrepreneurial sense and tenacity started to show in Las Vegas. Using their final funds, he and his son Rick started the gold and silver coin store in a small 300-square-foot area. Though it wasn't glitzy, it was a beginning. Eventually getting a license to acquire and sell second-hand items, they grew their company and relocated to a bigger site. Richard and Rick, however, had greater aspirations. They hoped to start a pawn business. This called for a unique Las Vegas license. Back then the city granted one pawn license for every 50,000 people. The Harrisons thus had to wait till the population reached 250,000. They opened the gold and silver pawn business only 2 miles from the Las Vegas Strip when that finally occurred in 1989. From there the company expanded consistently. Richard and Rick were lending out roughly $3 million yearly by 2005, making $700,000 in interest income. Gamblers, collectors, and history enthusiasts all found the pawn store to be a center. The shelves were crammed with unusual things with interesting tales, sports memorabilia, and jewelry. Richard was famous for his keen eye and no-nonsense haggling. He wasn't scared to leave a poor bargain, and could find a phony in seconds. Years in the Navy had taught him discipline. Years of suffering had given him knowledge. Then all in 2009, everything changed. Debuting Pawn Stars, the History Channel transformed the family company into a worldwide phenomenon. The show's combination of history, comedy, and family relationships made it an immediate success. In 3 months it rose to the top-rated show on the network. Richard found the celebrity surprising but welcomed it in his own manner. Often he portrayed the part of the grouchy father figure, but behind the scenes, he was quite engaged with the company, frequently getting to the store before anybody else and working late to ensure all went well. Pawn Stars' popularity gave the family great riches. The store went from serving 70 people daily to thousands. Daily it drew 3,000 to 5,000 visitors by 2012. Visitors queued to greet the Harrison family and visit the shop that had become into a part of pop culture past. Adding to his increasing wealth, Richard made $15,000 each episode. When he passed away in 2018, his net worth was thought to be about $8 million. But Richard's wealth was not only financial, it was about the principles he handed down to his family. He showed his grandchildren and children the need of diligence, integrity, and tenacity. Though he was successful, he always remembered the origins and the battles that formed him. He thought, regardless of what life threw at you, to go on. He once advised against dwelling on the past. Your future is still to come, make the most of it. Then who would get the riches Richard toiled so much to amass? His death then, what effect did it have on the family and the company he left behind? Richard Old Man Harrison left behind a legacy when he died in June 2018 that reached far outside the confines of the gold and silver pawn store. Known for his quick intellect, harsh humor, and great love for his family, Richard's death signaled the end of an age. But like with any family legacy, his death sparked debate over who would continue his work and gain from the empire he created. Valued at about $8 million, Richard's estate was detailed in his testament. Unexpectedly, his will was not as clear-cut as one might think. Richard made a startling adjustment 1 year before his death, even though his wife Joanne and 3 sons, Rick, Joseph, and Christopher, were first designated beneficiaries. Richard purposefully excluded his youngest son Christopher from the list of beneficiaries in a modified will. The revised paper said, "I would want to show my love and affection for Christopher Keith Harrison. But for the goals of this will, I have purposefully and with full awareness neglected to provide for him and his problem." Many admirers and even some relatives were left wondering by this choice. Why would Richard leave his youngest kid off the will? What had transpired to cause him to take such a daring action? Sadly, Richard never explained his motives, hence the specifics of this decision are still unknown. Whatever the situation, it was obvious he had given the allocation of his estate much consideration. Most of his wealth went to his wife Joanne and his son Rick, who had been with him and operating the pawn business for decades. The oldest son and most active in the company, Rick was also designated estate executor, allowing him to manage his father's resources. Rick, who had labored with his father since the pawn shop opened in 1989, was profoundly impacted by his death. He referred to Richard as his hero and said he had shown him the importance of diligence, integrity, and wit. For Rick, carrying on the family company was not only a duty but also a means of honoring his father's legacy. Rick's Direction saw the gold and silver pawn store remains a vibrant company and a must-see place for Pawn Stars enthusiasts under Rick's direction. But Richard's death affected more than just Rick. Corey Harrison, his grandson too, suffered under his grandfather's legacy. Corey, known to fans as Big Hoss, grew up in the pawn store, picking up the profession from his father and grandfather. Corey frequently mentioned how much he respected Richard's business acumen and work ethic. Corey promised to continue the teachings his grandfather had given him following his passing, both in the store and in life. Austin Chumley Russell, Corey's boyhood friend and one of the show's breakout stars, is another important family member. Though not a biological related, Chumley was regarded like family by Richard, who frequently mocked him on the program but obviously had a soft spot for him. Chumley has said Richard helped him develop both personally and professionally. He has claimed that, particularly on remaining grounded and working hard, he will always carry the teachings Richard imparted to him. In the family, Richard's wife Joanne had a quieter but just as essential part. Joanne, married to Richard for almost 6 decades, stood by him at the highs and lows of their path. Every step of the way, she stuck with him from their early real estate challenges to their eventual pawn business success. Joanne became still significant for the family after Richard's passing as she provided her kids and grandkids strength and knowledge. Richard's impact, however, went beyond his close relatives. His legacy reached to the millions of people who viewed Pawn Stars and grew to appreciate the old guy for his intelligence, knowledge, and straight-shooting attitude to life. Tributes from all across the world flooded in over the days after his passing. Recalling Richard's cantankerous but lovable character, fans posted their best moments from the program. His History Channel co-workers and others from programs include American Restoration and Counting Cars also expressed their condolences, underlining his influence on the reality television industry. Among the most moving tributes was a unique Pawn Stars episode called A Treasure Remembered, featuring interviews with his family and some of the finest moments from his tenure on the show. The episode honored Richard's life and legacy. For those close to him and fans, it was a time to consider the guy who had become a cultural icon yet stayed faithful to himself. Though his influence on his family was perhaps more pronounced, Richard's effect on the company was unquestionable. No matter how difficult things became, he showed them to appreciate effort and to never give up. From the early days of the pawn store to the obstacles that accompanied fame and success, these teachings helped the family to navigate some trying times. For Richard, it was never about the money or the celebrity. It was about creating something enduring, something his family could be proud of. While the allocation of his fortune might have sparked debate, one cannot deny the legacy Richard Oldman Harrison left behind. His family keeps his legacy alive via the show that made him a household name, runs the company he founded, and passes on his beliefs to the next generation. But what about Richard's influence outside the pawn shop? How did he change the world with his influence and platform? And what honors and accolades did he get for his industry contributions? Richard Oldman Harrison wasn't simply a star on Pawn Stars or the proprietor of a world-renowned pawn shop. He became a symbol of tenacity, diligence, and pride in his profession. His influence went beyond the program. Over the years, he received several distinctions and awards for his efforts to the business as well as the community. By March 2010, Richard and the other Pawn Stars cast members got one of their most significant accolades. Oscar Goodman, mayor of Las Vegas, gave them a key to the city. This was not only about their performance, it was acknowledgement of their part in attracting people to Las Vegas and highlighting the city's distinctive culture. The Harrisons expressed thanks by presenting the mayor with a collection of coins, a gift that underlined their close relationship to the city that launched them.